Hello and
Hi.
welcome to
Hi.
the Empathsanonymous podcast.
Hi.
I'm Christina,
I'm Danny.
and today I'm so excited for you guys to listen to this because we talked to Brittani Williams, who is a hip hop head, and she is a licensed therapist. We just really get into it. She's also a local San Diegan. Grew up in LA, but lives in San Diego now. So that's really exciting that we are having a guest on who is local.
I'm just reeling it in. It was so good. I wouldn't necessarily call myself a hip hop head. I cannot.
Neither am I, no.
But I am the type of person who's appreciated lots of different genres over every era of my life. And so having a conversation with her who is just so passionate about hip hop alongside the work that she does in mental health, y'all just get ready. It's so good. But I guess before we get into the interview, what's in your cup, sister?
So today, I was just really feeling the vibe, even though the Padres lost today. I have Nova Easy Kombucha. It is the San Diego Connects Padres edition. It's called Sunset Slam, you guys. It is mango lime flavored and arguably the best hard kombucha flavor that I've ever had. It's gluten-free, vegan, naturally fermented, and alcoholic kombucha.
Nova, do you want my phone number?
Nova, will you sponsor the pod?
Nova, will you send me a case?
Nova, will you introduce us to the Padres?
Nova, do you need a sponsor?
Nova, we can be that for you.
Do you need a host?
Can we be
Can
the
we serve the
official
kombucha?
spokesgirls? Ooh, serve the
Give
kombucha.
me a shirt. I can match the City Connect can. No problem. I look good in any color. So what we could do is we'll be at Petco and we will serve everybody the Sunset Slam. Yes.
And okay,
You guys, it is
Ubi.
actually, I'm like, we're not taking the piss. Obviously, we always take the piss and we're just being weird.
Yeah.
But it's bomb. I'll tell you what. My mother, who's like, kombucha is disgusting. She just needs to learn. Loved it.
Marge loved it.
She loved the flavor. And also she was like, you can't even taste the alcohol. And I'm like, exactly.
That's the point.
That's the point.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful flavor.
So yeah, that's what's in my cup, literally. Figuratively, I don't know, again, showing up without really thinking about it.
Awesome.
You know? I'm here and I'm alive. We went to the beach yesterday, which was, I am such a beach person. I actually, one of the reasons that I moved to San Diego is that I just need to be near water. Can I afford to live on the water? No. Who can? Unless you're like Bill Gates. I don't know. But I need to be like near a body of water. I'm a Cancer moon. And it's just very healing and therapeutic to me. I like to go to the beach. Even if it's just for like an hour, I'm going to read a book, I'm going to journal or whatever. But
Just for reconnection purposes.
Yeah.
Grounding purposes.
yes, it was Molly Ann's birthday. Happy birthday. It's actually her birthday today.
It's her
when we're
real
recording
birthday
this.
today. Happy birthday, Molly
It won't
Ann.
be when this comes out, but it
I
is
gotta
today.
say, I don't know that many Leos, but she is my favorite. Just gonna put
Period.
that out there.
She's in good camp. Leo women.
Yes.
I like Leo women. So yeah, we were there for her birthday and we swam like mermaids in the ocean
Nice.
until I literally had a Charlie horse in my calf because I was just going too hard.
She came back up to the tent. She's like, I got a Charlie horse. I got a Charlie horse and I had to get out because it was going to take me under.
I did.
And I'm
It was
looking
gonna
at her
take
like-
me out.
And I just looked at her like, that's a good thing you came out because not a strong swimmer, to say the least.
Are you not?
I'm not. I
Really?
can swim. I just don't have confidence. And I didn't learn how to swim until I was
Oh.
10.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that about you.
Yeah, I just don't, like, I'm not, it's part of the reason why I'm not comfortable getting in the ocean. The main reason is I can't see. I don't know what's under me. I don't know what's around me. The waves are very strong. They're very loud.
Yeah.
And I don't want to die.
Good reason.
It's like one of my biggest fears, I think, is drowning. That's like the worst way to die for me.
That's a rough death. That and in a fire. I don't want to burn to death.
Right? I don't want to burn.
I don't want to experience my flesh melting off my
Right?
body.
Don't crisp me into a potato.
Yeah.
I'm not for that.
Yeah. It was a really fun day. It was the perfect day for the beach because it was just
So nice.
It was like warm, hot, but not too hot to where it's like unbearable.
Yeah, no, you never don't want that.
And the ocean was not too cold, which was really nice. But
there was a little bit of like, I definitely went in the water, like my feet touched the water. Like I don't, she touched it. She's not like that scared. You know what I mean? But no, it was good. I'm trying to get my daughter more used to the water. So us putting our feet in, and like she loves the beach. So I'm not trying to have her experience my experience, if that makes sense. I want her to have her own experience. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think she did.
I think so.
She at first was like, absolutely not. She's very sensory. She doesn't like to touch the sand. So at first she was like, absolutely not. And then we took her down and she's like, I don't want to touch the water. I don't want to be wet.
Yeah.
And then eventually she was just like,
she got used to it. We were there for several hours. So it took her a little minute, but overall it was good. But yeah, I feel like it's been just lots going on over the weeks. I'm done with school, everybody.
She is.
I know you're tired of hearing about it, and you have 2 weeks off, and I'm going to talk about it again after that. But yeah, it's been good. I'm ready to have my mini summer. I suppose it goes into what's in my cup.
Yes. Yeah, what is in your cup?
But I was saying all that to say, like, it's been busy, and maybe that's why it feels like we are not showing up. I don't want to say fully present, because we're present.
Yeah. I mean, I'm saving it for the next time because I'm just starting. Well, I can say this. I'm going back to therapy. I've started going back to therapy. I've had 2 sessions, so like the intake and stuff. So not a lot has really come of it yet. Mm-hmm. But I'm starting. I mention it in this episode that I'm starting ERP therapy. Because I can't say because she hasn't given me a exact diagnosis yet. I think I'm getting it next week.
Okay.
If I do have it. I may have OCD. So ERP therapy is
What does that stand for? It's okay if you don't know. It just, when you said it was my first time ever hearing that.
Hold on. Let me look.
While she looks that up, we are in our era of destigmatizing diagnoses as being bad or overwhelming like personality defining.
Oh, yeah. This isn't, if anything, just supposed to be empowering for me.
Yes. We should have a party is what I wanted to say.
Oh my God.
Anything for me to throw a party?
For sure. Oh my gosh. And get one of those cakes. We can even decorate it ourselves.
Because you want to do it.
Those cute cakes. And maybe say like, I have OCD. You're like OCD babe or something like that on it.
Yeah. We'll make a gluten-free cake. We're going to decorate it ourselves. We're going to get Nova kombuchas. You know what would be funny is if we did something that was like a symptom. Like to be a part of the party for comfort, like having to watch the same thing. So we'll just have a movie marathon, or for you, it'd be more like a TV show marathon.
Yeah.
And we'll do like a Gossip Girl, whatever.
Yeah. Yes.
But
one of my like comfort shows, or like I have comfort movies.
The Emperor's New Groove. We'll add it.
Emperor's New Groove.
We'll just have a movie marathon, and we'll just eat cake.
Poetic Justice.
Ooh.
Poetic Justice, and
Baby
she's gotta
Janet.
have it. You know, when I'm watching those, I'm in a place.
Okay. Well, let's do it as like a celebration.
Yeah. Practical Magic. I think I've watched that one 5,000 times.
We should do it fall in July.
So it stands for Exposure and Response Prevention Therapy, because what my therapist was explaining to me is that talk therapy is great. There's nothing against talk therapy. But if you have OCD, it's not necessarily helpful because it almost triggers talking about it will then make you have that compulsion. And like when you're with your therapist in talk therapy, they may talk you through it and you're like, oh yeah, yep, I'm gonna be better, it's gonna be great, blah blah blah, and then something triggers you and then it's just back
outside
to the
of
same
therapy
shit. This basically, I have to keep a journal of all the things that trigger some kind of compulsion, or like for me it's obsessive thoughts. So what triggers my spiral, and I have to keep track of it. And so then once I keep track of it, also she can see everything.
Oh,
so there's no hiding it. I can't be like, oh yeah, no, that doesn't trigger me, like, because then you're not allowed to avoid it. So
oh my gosh, Sherry, I'm thinking it's just like an iCloud note.
No, it's in the app. They have a special app. It's called No CD. You guys can check it out if you think that you suspect that you have it, or you do have it and you want some therapy for it. No CD. They've been awesome so far, and they have their own app.
We'll link it.
I would love to have one of their spokespeople on the podcast. I heard the reason I heard of them is because I was listening to Balanced Black Girl.
Okay.
And she's had Sarah on, who is one of their chief officers or something like that. Ooh. So I would love to have them on the podcast one day, maybe when I'm deeper into my journey or something like that. But yeah, that's where I'm checking in, is that I'm a little bit nervous because it's a very intense form of therapy because you have to face everything head on. It's scary, but she keeps reminding me, you've done a lot of scary and brave things in your life, so this will be no different. It's just going to be hard because it's the things you don't necessarily want to face.
Right. Different scary things, different hard things.
Yeah, and I'm excited because she's like, yes, it will provide you with relief and tools in your OCD, but it also will provide you with a lot of tools in just navigating life. She's like, people who don't have OCD can also do ERP therapy. It's not just people with OCD, because it does provide you with a lot of tools, because you have to face scary things. You have to face the things that you don't want to look at. And so everybody has shit in their closet. But yeah, how are you checking in?
I'm so good now. I am chilling.
Yeah.
I'm chilling.
Yeah.
I'm ready for my hot girl 2-week summer. Bring it on, bitch. I went swimming for the first time this summer. Girl, that's embarrassing. It's a pool 200 feet away.
It's not embarrassing.
I mean, you're right. You're right.
You did what you had to do. Because I'm sure that maybe your reasoning for not was that I know if I get in the pool, it's not going to be like an hour and then, okay, I'm going to go study. It's like going to turn into 3-4 hours.
Yeah.
And then my whole entire afternoon has gotten away from me.
Yeah. I definitely did learn a lot about myself during this. I learned that getting back into school after being out of it for so long and then just going balls to the wall to 2 summer sessions was kind of crazy. I need to relearn myself. I need to relearn how I learn. I need to relearn how I study and figure out what works best for me, because I don't think that how I navigated it this summer was like the best way. So now I'm going to be a lot more intentional about how I study. I'm going to be intentional about where my breaks are and what I'm doing during my breaks and actually taking them. That's the problem. It's like I can set up a break and then not actually take a break. Or it's like I will take a break from schoolwork and then do podcast stuff. So then my brain doesn't really actually have a break from just vegging out and just having a moment. Even if it's just 5 minutes, I'm finding myself not allowing myself to do that.
Right.
So,
and it's like, how much can you really unwind in 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I experience with work. It's like, because I also work in podcasting, it's like I'm thinking, talking, promoting podcasts for 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
And then I stop and then I
Plus
have
4.
to do my podcast.
Yeah.
So I understand.
It's a lot. It's a lot. It's kind of like having a kid when you feel like the job doesn't stop.
Yeah.
The job doesn't stop.
Adulting doesn't stop.
Yeah. The
It's
podcast
annoying.
is a baby and
But-
she requires a lot of attention.
Yes. But I specifically remember being, in my early to late 20s and being like, man, I just really wish that I had more going for me in my life. I wish that there was more happening in my life. I wish I had more to do. And now it's happening and I'm like, damn it.
Wish I had less to do.
I'm grateful. I
Yeah.
was thinking about that in the car yesterday. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm grateful that I'm busy, because there was a
Yeah.
time where I was not.
Yeah, that's so true. I've been thinking about that a lot recently. I'm like, gosh, I'm so busy. There's just so much to do. But I am in a place in my life where I think I really need to remain busy and keep myself busy with things that I enjoy doing and that are bringing me a lot of like insight about myself and just kikiing.
Yeah.
We love a kiki. It's
Yeah.
like if I didn't have this, I would have a lot of free time. Put it you that way.
That's true. Imagine what would we be doing? Watching TV.
Watching TV, probably fucking eating a lot of snacks.
Right. Going to wineries all the time, spending all our money.
Spending all of our money.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the issue. It's a big issue. We're trying our best.
So, without further ado, let's get into our chat with Brittany, and I hope you guys enjoy it.
Enjoy.
We'll talk to you on the other side. All right, so today on the podcast, we have Brittani Williams. She is a San Diego-based EMDR certified licensed clinical social worker, social work entrepreneur, educator, and hip-hop enthusiast with over 9 years of experience in the mental health field. She founded Healmatic Group Practice, integrating her passion for hip-hop into her clinical work, and leads a team providing therapeutic services while incorporating her own music to explore therapeutic themes. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today, Brittany.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're really excited to explore. I'm wearing my Aaliyah shirt today in honor, and we've been bumping some hip-hop music today just to really get into the vibe. But first of all, we want to ask you what's in your cup today.
Literally what's in my cup is water.
Mm-hmm.
I actually just spent like 2 hours in the studio today.
Oh,
So the recording process, it literally feels like a workout with just a lot of breath control, a lot of timing. When you record music, you're also trying to evoke the emotion that you wrote to, that you were
Right.
feeling at the time. It feels so like an EMDR session in itself.
Right.
So I have just been drinking lots of water today,
yeah.
and it's also been hot too. So
So
like
hot.
cold
Very.
water
Right.
has been hitting the spot.
We feel you. Got to stay hydrated. We went to the beach yesterday, so we've
Yes.
both been just like guzzling water today.
Mm-hmm.
Like we said before, we're so fascinated with your work. It's one of the reasons that we reached out. I was like, oh my God, Danny, we have to have her on the podcast because I feel like your work is so unique.
Right.
So we think it's so special to communities of color and hip hop lovers in general that you incorporate the transformative principles of hip hop into your work. Can you share with our audience what led you down this path?
Just my lived experience of being a hip hop head, a hip hop fan. I call myself a student of hip hop culture lifelong. What led me into it was just recording studio sessions that felt therapeutic with my friends in not just in high school, but also when I went into USC for my undergrad. I was doing a lot more recording with other artists in LA. And so I got my bachelor's in sociology. So I was looking more so of like macro issues that involved hip hop culture, such as sexism and all sorts of things, right? But it wasn't until that time in my life where I was also a single mom at that time. So I was going into making music with a different type of, I didn't have certain I had limited time, right? So when I was making music, I had like only a certain time I had to be home,
Right.
but I built really powerful connections with producers in LA. We were having like really meaningful check-ins before recording. We were processing things about what the music was about, and then recording the music is somatic very much.
Right.
So it is like, for example, I recorded a song today called Gratitude, and it's just one long verse. And that track killed me to record.
Yeah.
But to write to, it was a process of free association. I came into the studio, I heard the beat, right? The beat is really what dictates what comes about emotionally, verbally, etc. And I just went with it, line after line, bar after bar. And so it was a hard track to perform, but to create was super therapeutic because you're just kind of going with it. So it was at that time I didn't know anything about therapy because I was more so macro, but I very much knew from a lived experience that it was healing. And I didn't just know that for me, but I knew that for everyone around me as
Right.
well. We didn't really grow up normalizing therapy. We didn't have access to therapy, but I mean, All Eyes on Me was super therapeutic to listen to.
Yeah.
Aaliyah, even aside from hip hop, like Sade, I grew up on Sade,
Yeah.
like super calming and grounding, right?
Yeah.
But you do need some of those tracks that are a little bit activated that might evoke and release some repressed emotions such as anger or, sadness and grief and whatnot. That's the power of music. So it was really my own recording studio sessions that I was like, I got to go to grad school to further research this. Like something is definitely working in these studio sessions. One, when you have not just safe relationships, but vulnerable connections and relationships with the people you're making music with. That's a therapeutic relationship in therapy,
Of
right?
course.
And then you have the themes, which is what we talk about in therapy. What are we processing today? And then the somatic work of recording, timed breathing. When you hit a certain word, you need to say it like this. You need to make it believable. So what does that require? That requires leaning into feeling the feeling, allowing the body to almost relive the moment,
Yeah.
which is so EMDR.
I totally
So
relate
fascinating.
because, whenever things are happening in our culture and in our communities, I always turn to Changes by Tupac. And it really gets me through 2020 when everything was happening with George Floyd. I would just kind of play it on repeat. And it really was, like you said, that therapeutic. While I'm listening to the music, I'm also processing my own feelings. And I'm so in awe by the fact that that song is 30 years old now. And it's still so relevant to what we go through today. The only thing that has changed is we have had a black president, but pretty much everything else remains the same. So I think that hip hop is really special, and it's something that's really important to the West Coast culture in general. and what really unites us all together.
Yeah.
It puts us in a place where we can force ourselves to maybe feel feelings that are very uncomfortable or that you wouldn't otherwise express because of, like you said, lack of access to resources or therapy, or the stigma that comes along with it in Black and brown culture that it's not okay to express those feelings. So I think having that musical release is something that's very important for Black and brown communities in general, who are not necessarily, air quotes here, allowed to express those feelings.
Yeah, and that's like what makes music in general feel safe to put words to experiences, right? Like, think about, we might not have a vulnerable conversation at the dinner table with our parents, but put on like a mariachi song or Earth, Wind, and Fire song.
Yeah.
Like, now we're feeling emotions. And so we see the same thing with EMDR, right? Bilateral stimulation, which is basically moving the body right, left, while at the same time accessing the past, keeps people in their window of tolerance. And so I've always said, like, we've always known healing through talk and movement. EMDR got that from indigenous cultures. Now we formatted it, and now it's a modality. And so I think in the recording session with me as a young person, I paid attention to that. I think it's also powerful. We see this with artists, right? Where I think about, there's a song that I grew up on called Keep Your Head to the Sky by Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Yeah.
And it is like such a powerful, beautiful song. But it's talking about, like, dang, there's a lot of wild stuff happening. There's a lot of stuff outside of our control, but still keep your head to the sky, right? And then the melody and the music around it is grounding. And so it kind of also creates this experience where two things can exist at once.
So true. That actually kind of speaks into our follow-up question, essentially about EMDR. I know we've discussed it a little bit, but as far as our podcast, we love to explore all different types of therapy. I myself personally have been very interested in it because so far I only have real experience with talk therapy. And while that's okay, I'm definitely someone who is like a professional in emotional suppression. So I do wonder if like intellectualizing all the things that I've experienced are definitely helpful for me to talk about with a therapist. But as far as EMDR is concerned, would you be able to kind of speak to what that means for anyone who isn't familiar with it?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I feel you on being a professional suppressor. I remember when I first got trained in EMDR, they basically, in your training, you have to do it on yourself, right? You have to do the work on your own trauma.
Yeah.
So when they asked me about the first time I ever experienced imposter syndrome, it was like elementary school. And they were like, 0 to 10, how bad does that feel? Like, how active? I'm like, maybe like a 2. Like, it's not that big of a deal. But I grew up with brothers. I grew up Mexican. I grew up super tough. So I didn't know how to access my feelings until they had me doing the sets. And I was like, oh, this feels like a 6 now. And this, you know what I mean? So you process until it's not. So there's so many ways to describe EMDR. And it's something me and my team often talk about, like, how do we best describe this, especially to like first timers coming to therapy. When you see EMDR on TikTok and Instagram, it looks like it's just bilateral stimulation, but there are phases to EMDR. It's not just that. I call it like, that's like the reprocessing work.
Right.
So that's like a later phase. But I think the most digestible way to describe EMDR is it replicates REM sleep. So when we go to sleep, our eyes are moving bilaterally right, left. And that is why we can wake up and we can have a dream and we might remember bits and pieces, but we don't really leave with any physical sensation tied to it. If you do, that means that you should definitely go to therapy and see what's going on, because that's your body trying to process something that is still not, it's not fully processed. So dreams are definitely something we pay attention to.
Okay.
I mean, not that we're dream interpreters or anything like that.
Right.
That's super fascinating to me. I'm not trained in that. But again, if you're having a reoccurring dream, it's representing something that might be stressful in your life. And so that's how the brain properly processes information. If it goes there, it experiences it. Your eyes are moving bilaterally rapidly, and then it processes into long-term memory, where you can know, oh, I think I had a bad dream, but I don't remember. I just remember this happened. And then you almost forget more and more about it throughout the day, right?
Yeah.
That means your brain has properly processed whatever that was.
Okay.
So in
good.
EMDR, we're basically doing the same thing. And here's the thing too. We talk a lot about this in the trainings. It doesn't have to be a single case trauma. Some people that are trained, they'll go into like, what are the 10 worst trauma or worst things that have happened to you in your life? For some people, it's an experience, right? It's an identity. You can't process racial trauma based off of one event. That's something that you might experience lifelong. And so what EMDR does is it causes you to think about that at the same time moving bilaterally. It could be your eyes, it could be tapping. This is the butterfly tap that was super, super popular. You'll see that. Sometimes it's swaying, like sometimes it's tapping on, it could be any type of bilateral movement. So you're really thinking about whatever is activating in the body while moving bilaterally at the same time to desensitize the physical sensation tied to it. Once that is done, then you go into different phases where now you're attaching new meaning to whatever that event is. So for example, something happened in elementary school. What do you want to believe about yourself? I want to believe I am good enough. I want to believe that I do have gifts. I want to believe I do matter. Tap that in until that feels 1,000% your truth.
Okay.
Not logically, but in the body, does that feel true to you? And that's kind of the phases. Now, there are other parts of EMDR that are super cool too. One of my favorite phases of EMDR is called resourcing. This is how I explain it to clients. When people come in for EMDR, I tell them EMDR is almost like going back to the gym and you haven't been there in a minute, right?
Right.
So you're meeting with a trainer. When you meet with the trainer, the trainer is going to do an assessment and like, okay, where are you strong? What do we need to change? What's the plan? You're not working out yet. You're coming up with the plan, right?
Right.
Then you go into some workouts. Some workouts might be stretching, something not as intense, right? You're building up your tolerance. You don't want to get injured. That's the resourcing phase. And then you go into hardcore workouts, which is reprocessing work. And then you go into recovery. And that is literally what the phases are like in EMDR. So it's very intense work. I call resourcing therapeutic yoga and then reprocessing work CrossFit. Like,
Okay.
come ready. And then after, got to make sure you're drinking water, you're resting, you're taking naps, because I tell folks all the time, your brain's not done processing when you leave my office. Like, it is continuing to work.
Right.
So you got to make sure you're taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
So there's 1,000 ways to describe EMDR, but that's kind of like the best way. That's the best I got today.
Yeah, I feel like everyone can understand it from a fitness analogy the best, because you can understand what workout means what. Like, what to expect when you go into yoga, what to expect when you get into a CrossFit class. Those two things are not the same.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
opposite.
yoga can be intense though.
Oh,
like,
very
much.
much.
Sculpting is
Especially the heated
the
yoga.
heated one. Yeah, I was just gonna say, when you're in a room and it's 99 degrees. Okay, girl, that's a bit much.
yes.
Yeah, it takes a lot of mind-body connection as well.
Yeah.
And I just want to say this too. I am EMDR certified. A big part of my training really shifted when I got EMDR trained. But I always say we're not loyal. My team, we're not loyal to one modality. We believe you can't put people's experiences in a box. So we're really integrative. As you do EMDR, you might run into parts work. As you, sometimes when you run into parts work, you need to explore radical acceptance. All these different themes come up. And so a big part of my hip hop background is like, okay, how do we remix this and create like what feels grounding and sound for this person? And so I don't necessarily brand myself as like loyal to one modality. I just say I'm integrated, but I am definitely loyal to mind-body framework. You can't disconnect what's happening in your mind from the physical body. And so I think I see that, we see that with a lot of other practices as well.
Right. I started in talk therapy, and it was really great for really opening the doors to connecting to myself and really starting that processing journey. And what I found 2 years later is that there's still some of these themes that are reoccurring and they're still affecting me. And while I can identify them and like intellectualize them, like we were saying, I was having a hard time moving through them. Like you said, when you're done, your brain's not done. So I just recently, I'm like at the very beginning stages of starting ERP, which is pretty intense. I start that this next week. And so I've been like watching videos and I'm like, wow, this is a lot, but I think that I'm ready for it. But I think that it's interesting too that you incorporate all these different modalities, because I'm guessing that people need different things for different times in their life too, right?
Yeah, I think too, like, I just believe in honoring the hierarchy of the brain. Oldest part of the brain is bottom, the youngest part is top. Top is talk. But with that said, with communities of color, also people who have a lack of trust with therapy and mental health, talk therapy is very important to build up to the part of going into body work, right? We don't have a good relationship with our bodies. Like, think about that. I'm not just talking about like what we physically look like, but I'm talking about like what we feel. Like, most of us have got clowned on for feeling vulnerable emotions, or got roasted by our cousins, or what, like, we just don't have a good relationship with our bodies. And so talk therapy is important in the beginning phases to create safety and to create normalizing what's happening in the space and being honest. So when I get into EMDR later on, I'll tell my clients, like, look, this is about to look real different. Like, I'm not going to be talking as much. Like, I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to trust wherever your brain and your body takes us. And wherever that is, that's where we're supposed to go today. And so it's such vulnerable work that you do need some of that top part of the brain talk therapy work.
Right. You kind of answered the follow-up question that I had, which I think was just about when someone is experiencing something, for instance, like PTSD. We know that EMDR is used a lot with PTSD, but does EMDR also help with just anyone seeking therapy, which is, of course, what we already answered, essentially. So do you work with people that have been diagnosed with PTSD, or like you mentioned, is it basically all across the board?
Yeah, definitely PTSD is one of our specialties. Mostly we're going to see developmental trauma, which, here's the reality. Based off of my experience in the field, we've all had experiences with trauma. We all have. And so developmental trauma is incredibly common. When you're looking at developmental trauma, you're talking also about attachment work. What I've learned, which has been a big shift for me, I think when I got EMDR trained, I had a big identity crisis as a therapist, because I was really into like CBT and mindset work in the beginning. And then when I got trained, I learned that the two universal things that we're going to see in therapy is grief work and attachment work. And so those are the most common things. You know, now if we're talking about diagnoses, we're not always going to see that diagnosed in the form of PTSD and whatnot. But I would say those are the two, universal things that we're encountering is attachment trauma, attachment wounds. Sometimes that's a mother wound, a father wound. Sometimes that's, religious trauma. And then we're also seeing grief work, because it's like you're grieving what my life would have been like if I didn't go through that. What would my life be like if I had a very nurturing father figure, or, connecting those dots. And then the body holds emotional memory. So it remembers things, right? And so, yeah, I don't particularly like to diagnose. I do, and for insurance purposes, and also if the client meets criteria and all these different things. But we are seeing that PTSD and all the different forms, acute, etc., we are seeing benefit most from EMDR. There are symptoms that we're seeing that might not be a good fit, like if there's a brain injury or trauma. And then also like chronic dissociation is something that might get in the way of EMDR. So this is, think about this. When you're accessing a really core trauma, like a big core trauma in EMDR, and I'm asking you, pull that image up, run it like a scene, and tap as fast as you can. But there's a protected part that's like, man, hell no, we're not. Nope. Yeah. Not accessing that, right? So you have to have a part, and this is where parts work comes in. You have to have a part that is able to kind of surrender and allow the whole spirit, mind, body to access the work. So we see all different things happen, and that's why it's important to be flexible. There are a lot of therapists that step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And that's good, right? To have that framework, but you also have to move with people. You know, their pain is real. It's not something that necessarily fits in order all the time.
Yeah. And I bet a lot of that too, as a therapist, is intuitive. And then I'm sure a lot of times, like you said, mistrusting yourself, and identifying when that disconnect may be happening. I am so interested to hear, how do you incorporate hip hop into your practice? Do you play it in the background during a session, or how does that work?
It just depends. So when we're looking at what is hip hop therapy was researched and developed by Dr. Edgar Tyson in the 90s. But basically, his research looks at the elements of hip hop, which is not just music, it's MC, DJing, breakdancing, graffiti art, and then all the other elements, knowledge of self, street language, street fashion, all these different forms of self-expression, right?
Yeah.
So that's what the elements of hip hop are. And hip hop culture has principles too. The same way social works have the NSW has principles for us to abide by and work through. Hip hop has principles too. It's that combined with traditional evidence-based therapeutic modalities. It can look various ways. I always tell my team, like, being a therapist is super creative. We don't always think of it that way, but it very much is. So I've incorporated hip hop therapy by running groups. So I've played a song, and the first thing that I'll have them do is I'll have them close their eyes and I'll just have them listen to it. The second time I'll have them listen to it again, and I'll tell them, I want you to tap at a regular slow pace, and I want you to focus on one part of the song that just feels soothing and grounding to you. So some people are going to pick the bass line. Some people are going to pick the vocals, right? Some people they're going to pick the keys, whatever that is. And then the third time, I'm having them listen to the lyrics and write down or highlight things that stand out for them. And then when we go into group processing, we can implement lyrical analyzation. So for example, why do you think this person wrote this song? Where do you think they were at in their life to write it? What stood out to you? How does that reflect what's going on in your life? And what it does is it allows processing to happen in a very non-personal way. So I might not feel comfortable talking about shame or a breakup or whatever, but you just played this Mary J. Blige song, and I really feel that, right? And this is why music is so powerful, is because I've done that and people are crying. And that's because music takes us to a time in our life where maybe we were young and it connects us to our inner teen, or it connects us to a time in our life where we had a lot of confidence and safety, right? And now we're in this phase in our life where maybe that's not there. So I've done it in that way. I've also done an open mic night with the same group of women. And these women were coming out of prison during COVID. They were struggling with co-occurring disorders. So we did an open mic night. I worked with everyone individually on their verse. And it was a powerful experience. Like, this was the first time they got up on a mic and the counselors had to sit there and they had the stage. The director had to sit there and listen to them because they had the stage and they got to tell their stories. And it was probably the most moving thing I've ever seen in my career. Like, I did a lot of research around hip hop therapy, but to witness it and to also perform alongside of them and be a part of them, a part of their creative process, was like very, very spiritual. It was just such a blessing to be a part of that work. And then you have the studio-based approach, right, which is kind of like J.C. Hall's work, who was Dr. Edgar Tyson's mentee. He's based out of the South Bronx. He runs a hip-hop therapy studio. So literally there's equipment there, there's a recording booth, there's beat machines, and the kids go in there. And exactly what I did today, they do with JC, who's a therapist, right? So they get to sit down and they get to, pick their beat, write to it, and process out whatever it means with JC. And JC talks a lot about, like, it's not just a therapeutic relationship, but it's also me valuing them as an artist. It's me valuing their art and their work. That's what makes especially young people feel important, right?
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful, almost like replacement behavior of what we see could happen in a negative way with, in the streets or whatnot, or even in unhealthy relationships. And so there's many, many different ways, but those are definitely some examples. Another thing that I always say too that's super effective is, like, I'll pull in hip hop history.
Oh, cool. I love learning about hip hop history.
I'll pull in interviews, right? I'll pull in interviews from like some of our favorite artists, whether it be J. Cole, whether it be talking about the recent beef and like the track, the big moment Kendrick Lamar is having. I'll pull in those moments or those interviews and we'll talk about conflict. Like, what does it mean to have beef? And what did it look like with Biggie and Pac? What does it look like now? And what's the risk and benefits? And exploring themes like that. Bottom line, I think we all know this, is when you work with people, you're going to get further along if you include their culture, if you include what's important to them. And that's what we see with hip hop therapy.
Yeah, that sparked something because we actually, when the song came out, we talked about it on the podcast. And being on the outside, I've always been like, I understand, you know, the history and everything between Biggie and Tupac, but I've often wondered now, what is, like, just as a hip hop head, in your opinion, like, what is the significance of the diss tracks and like, why is it still so prevalent? It really gets people hyped up, and I've always just been like, why do they keep going back and forth?
I mean, it's multiple meanings, right? As a fan, it's competitive. It's like boxing, right? So like there's that aspect. But for me, the way that I look at it is I also think that there's a difference between cultural hip hop and industry hip hop, right?
Of course.
Like, and that's what Kendrick was basically speaking to. Kendrick is basically saying there's authenticity, there are principles, there is a community of people that you represent, you reflect their voice. And so KRS-One talks about that. Like, there's a difference between a rapper and MC. A rapper is someone that's going to rap about me, my experience, what they got and what they possess, versus an MC is going to tell you exactly how you feel because they're in the same environment, they're taking notes and they're noticing shifts and changes that are happening within communities. And so they are the mouthpiece for the community, right? So there is that difference. And that's more of the, you know, the philosophical piece of it. And the other thing about it too is hip hop is super powerful. There are people that have profited millions and millions of dollars. There are industry record labels that want a certain thing to come out because it's going to shift a culture. It's going to shift a movement. And that could be good. That could be against the principle. So to me, you know, I grew up on MC Lyte, Queen Latifah, like very pro-Black time in hip hop, the miseducation of Lauryn Hill. We see this, and then we also see the rise of Lil' Kim and Foxy Brown, Nicki Minaj. It's not to diss any of them. It's just to note that there was a difference. There was a time where we had very conscious hip hop, just from the female perspective. Then you had a mix, which I think was dope to have that blend. And then you have, like, Rhapsody is one of the few out right now that could probably outbar any other male rapper too. But there's just things to note about that are just different. So that's probably a conversation every hip hop fan can go into as well. But yeah.
Right. And I can see totally that Kendrick was like sparking a conversation, but I just noticed that there's a lot of hip hop artists. There's always like the antithesis. And so I've always wondered or felt like, you know, is this divisive? Always having two sides, basically two fan bases that are kind of at each other's throat. And I know that that just kind of plays into, like you said, the commercialization of hip hop and the fact that, you know, somebody is sitting behind a desk making money off of that. And I think that in a broader respect for the Black community, it's storytelling and it's poetry. I think one of the first artists that I really got into in hip hop was J. Cole, because it was one of the first hip hop artists that I just felt so seen by. And I loved, you know, the way that he flows and just the way that he tells his own story. And even in a broader respect, how he talks about culture and society. You kind of answered my question a little bit with some of the artists that you named, but how has hip hop brought healing into your own life?
I don't know. It's like Vince Staples said, like, it's this one funny moment where they asked him, like, when did you fall in love with hip hop? He's like, I don't know. Like, when did you fall in love with your mom? Right. Hip hop is just always something that I've loved. So my brother's 4 years older than me. So he grew up in like the golden era of hip hop. So everything he listened to, I had to listen to. So the interesting thing about it is that I grew up on a lot of East Coast hip hop. Like my brother loved Wu-Tang and Jay-Z and Nas with Illmatic and all these different artists at that time. But I think for me, I really was influenced by the local hip hop underground hip hop scenes, I was really drawn to the consciousness of artists. So Immortal Technique was an artist I really liked. I learned more about history through his music than I did in U.S. government in high school.
Right.
I recently I've learned about life path numbers, right? So I'm a life path 7, so I'm like
Okay.
super. I'm like someone who's always searching for deeper meaning of things.
Mm.
So that's very much reflected on like the artists that I grew up on. Lauryn Hill was a huge influence. I just loved her style, and I loved her way that she presented herself, where there's a femininity about her, but there's a boldness about her too, that I looked up to as a young person. Her Unplugged album, again, we're seeing the mix of vulnerability, like raw, authentic vulnerability, but the boldness and the power of your voice, right? Aside from that, though, like Kendrick has I've been a huge fan of Kendrick since he was local. I always loved going to a Kendrick Lamar show back in the day because it was like all of LA's there. Black, brown, Filipino, like Asian, white people, everyone together. And there was like no fighting. We see that today with his recent track, but like back in the day, it was because he was more local famous. It was just very intimate. Always like listening to his music. But yeah, Kendrick, the way J. Cole handled himself with the beef, I would say is more so like where I'm at in my life.
Right.
You know, where I'm gonna choose peace right now and, you know, let you guys fight this out.
Right. You guys have fun.
Yeah, it was like a bow out, like respectfully.
Yeah. But yeah, aside from that, Nipsey for sure has been a big influence. And then like some of my favorite artists right now is Coda the Friend. Coda the Friend is like, if you're going to therapy, listen to Coda the Friend right now, because Coda the Friend speaks on super therapeutic themes, boundaries, self-love, breakups, like all sorts of real things. And so I'm probably forgetting a bunch, but that's kind of what I could think of right now.
Yeah,
no, that's awesome.
The core.
Yeah. I have a couple of Coda's songs in my morning playlist because I just feel like, okay, this is how I want to start my day out.
Yeah, chill.
Yeah. Definitely a powerful artist in his own way.
Having this conversation makes me feel like, have I avoided certain music in like maybe just this last year of my personal experience? Because I know that obviously music is going to evoke emotion, and this is a common theme throughout when we have guests on and we're having these heavy conversations. I'm like, oh, I am, like I said earlier, a professional suppressor, but probably in ways that I'm not even realizing. I used to be so big on like, I was a playlist girly. They're very intentional, and I'm putting stuff together where it's like, okay, I have moods and I'm going to choose this, or it's like I've got a day that I'm going to do this and I'm playing this. But I've just been out of that element for probably several years. And so maybe revisiting that, I think maybe it's the scaries. I think maybe I'm getting some scaries.
What do you think is scary about it? Because I feel like that's very powerful to like, not to say that music is spells, but music evokes energy that can lead you into, like for me, I listen to gangster rap before I do a speaking engagement because I need that energy, right? So
the adrenaline.
I think that it's playlists are super powerful. What do you think? What are you afraid of with that?
Oh, so many things. I think that I've realized here recently that I'm still very much in several stages of grief. Like I go back and forth a lot with the stages. Denial is definitely one that comes up a lot, I think, because I'll have a thought. I'm like, no. I'm like, okay, girl. Or I'll have a feeling. I'm like, not for me. Yeah. And so I am getting to the point where it's like I can finally acknowledge that that's the truth. And so that's, I think, just first step. I mean, she can attest to this. We've been friends for like 13 years. We were not always in the same area, let alone the same state. So a lot of the time it was just me and her until 3:00 in the morning on the chats. And we were talking about music until that time. And we were sharing stuff all the time. We've always bonded over music
that's really
very
kind
much.
of what started our friendship.
Really. It was bonding over music, probably until 3 a.m. Not a great idea, but it happened and I'm glad we're here. But yeah, I think that that's going to spark me revisiting my true self. So when you said a song that comes on that reminds you of that confidence and reminds you of being in your authenticity and your true self, and then you listen to it again and you're like, oh wow, I do not have that same feeling. Like that is not coming up for me the way that it used to, and it just feels different. It feels odd. So I know that maybe revisiting that part of myself will probably resurface a lot of those things that maybe I'm not ready to quite deal
Ooh.
with.
I really relate to you though in that way, but with rapping. You know, as you get older too, it's like, where does this stuff fit into your life? You know, like
Yeah.
Yeah.
whether it be a playlist or whether it be having time to just be creative, like you got work, you got bills to pay, student loans, I got
Yeah.
soccer practice with the kids, like all these
Yeah.
different things. And so what you just described was kind of like sometimes we avoid our truest selves because of fear of whatever, right? Or we avoid accessing parts of ourselves. So I've had so many friends like, when are you going to get back to the studio? And I'm like, you know, you just put it off. But
Yeah.
actually going was really, really healing and very sense of wholeness. And I think the thing about music is sometimes you can't really listen to certain songs, right? Like
Yes. Yeah.
when my grandma passed, I couldn't listen to a certain song. You have to
Right.
stay in your window of tolerance and kind of go with where you're at. So that's the powerful thing about music, but then that's also the thing to be cautious about with yourself and then with people that you're working with too. So I 100% feel you on that. I am currently working back to myself as well.
Yeah. There's a lot of like, I'll shuffle my liked songs. And I mean, it's on my Spotify, which I've had for over 5 years, probably closer to 10. And there's a lot of skips. So, yeah, I skip a lot.
I'm not
But
mad at it.
yeah, I know that eventually I'll get to that point and I'll be able to listen to like a full song all the way through and appreciate it for a different reason. And it won't evoke so much of like a negative feeling.
Yeah, I think for me, one of those songs is All Falls Down by Kanye West. That song I would listen to all of the time in college because it was like my fuel. It was what was going to get me through. It's really hard for me to listen to it now. I actually listened to it on a walk yesterday or the day before, and it kind of brought me back to that place of almost the opposite. How you said listening to a song and reminding yourself of the confidence. I listened to it and I was reminded of how unconfident and how unhealed and unsure and how scared of the world that I was. So it's hard for me to listen to it now because it's like I almost see from a bird's eye view my old self and I'm like, ooh, I feel so hurt that you were so hurt.
You're kind of like on the other side of it.
Yeah.
I know what's interesting is that you came to that while walking and listening to that at the same time, which is layered bilateral stimulation. So the way EMDR was founded was by a woman. Francine Shapiro got a cancer diagnosis. She was walking her dog. She noticed her eyes were moving back and forth and she felt better after. So she started to research it. So again, these insights that we come up with on walks, right? Or like, I don't know, the Stairmaster or at the beach. Like, think about that. The beach is layered bilateral stimulation with the waves moving back and forth, your foot to sand on earth, right? The nature's ruled by rhythm. I feel like when we're in those spaces where there might be more revelations or more insights and connections as to why certain songs or why we did the things that we did in our past and coming to this realization that we did the best that we could back then. All these different things come up. And so I love that.
Yeah. Such good conversations.
I know.
To revisit my playlist for sure.
I know. When I feel like disconnected from music, I really have to have a come back to myself moment because that's often when I have a check-in and I'm like, wow, I also feel like disconnected to myself. I think that music is like is one of those tools that I've used since I was really young to feel connected to myself, my emotions and my body.
Sure.
Definitely makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, even just I took 2 summer classes and on top of like just struggling to focus when I have lyrics in the background, it's a struggle for me. I just most of the time chose lots of lo-fi. I chose lots of like frequency music. So nothing to really distract me, but also on the same side of that token, I'm kind of like, well, how intentional is this that I'm like not choosing certain songs or like I'm not playing a playlist that has lyrics. So I know it's definitely something to revisit. But we did want to spend a little bit of time talking about your upcoming event, which is local to the Southern California area, and that's August 11th. So if you would just want to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so we're doing a self-love summer jam. So I'm going to be there. Soko Ray from Soko Ray Therapy is going to be there. And then Cynthia is also going to be there. And so it's a really special event. I've spoke about this before, but if it wasn't for Soko starting her own practice, Pillmatic probably wouldn't exist. I saw her and she was kind of like the blueprint, like the big sister you kind of look up to in the field. And then Cynthia was always so encouraging of you need to perform, you need to like put your music out, and like really pushing me in that way and connecting how healing that is to inner teen or other parts of me. So yeah, we're going to be hosting an event in Long Beach on August 11th, and it's going to be kind of broken down into phases. So I'm going to perform 3 tracks. They're all connected to self-love. One track is called Self-Love specifically, but the playlist is really rooted in practices of self-love, right? So we see that term thrown out a lot, but self-love is hard. It's a practice. You got to put your work out in. Self-love involves gratitude. Self-love involves setting boundaries and maybe cutting off certain relationships, or recognizing that relationships that used to be really important in your life have kind of phased out. And that doesn't mean you beef it with someone. It's that process, right?
Right.
So it's going to be touching on themes like that. And then after, we're going to have a panel where we're going to kind of process it out. So kind of like what we do in hip hop therapy, but it's going to be all 3 of us, and it's going to be lots of fun. So I hope people can make it and, just vibe out with us, connect with us on a personal level. And then Long Beach is just such a dope city too. So I think it would be a really, really, dope day for people.
Yeah.
That sounds really exciting.
We are going to try our hardest to be there. So if you guys come, you'll be able to see us. And we can't wait to meet you, Brittany, in person. That would be so awesome. So we're so excited for that. And we are so grateful for you coming on today. I loved our conversation. I could honestly sit here more and more, but I want to respect your time and everything. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you. I feel like I could chop it up with you guys on music for another hour as well. So
I know.
You're not too far from me, so I think it would be dope if we link up and just, chop it up more. So
let's do it. Yeah. Another thing I wanted to ask is, do you ever do events in San Diego?
I mean, I've challenged myself recently, to be real, I just battle with a lot of imposter syndrome, like not feeling good enough, feeling, like all these different negative core beliefs come up. But I've challenged myself to go to open mics. And so I've been connecting to folks out here and whatnot. So I hope to do events in San Diego. Just getting back to performing has been something I'm really proud of myself. It's just kind of outside of my comfort zone, even though when I do it, I'm very much feeling in not necessarily comfort zone, but I feel like it's me. It's like the truest part of me that people are seeing. So I definitely hope to, get to that place.
Yeah, awesome. I've seen quite a few events pop up here and there. It was like several years back that I surprised my brother. I have a younger brother, which is me and him. Yeah. But I surprised him for his birthday because he has always been so invested in spoken word. And so I surprised him with the spoken word several years ago. And I think it was like in the North County, San Diego area, if I'm not mistaken, potentially North Park. But it was such a eye-opening experience, and it made me feel so grateful for people that could be that vulnerable. It's like you're already vulnerable enough writing it, then you have to get up on stage and perform it in front of people. That is something that's so admirable.
It's the ultimate act of vulnerability for sure. But vulnerability is contagious, and that's, I think, the power of spoken word and ciphers is that one person goes up and then you're on to the 5th person, and you're building, you're kind of build up the courage. So
you're like, okay, everybody else is here doing the same thing, I can also do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, if anything ever pops up, we would love to like come to an event. And I've seen a few like creative groups popping up in San Diego. I just haven't been able to like make it to one, but hopefully we'll be able to like support in that way.
Yeah, that'd be dope. Definitely.
Real quickly, can you tell our audience where to find you, and if they're seeking therapy in California and want to look into your practice, where to find that?
Yeah, so if you are interested in my work, you can find us on our website, which is hillmatic.health. Or if you're interested on all the other creative things that I do, you can find me on Instagram or TikTok at bwilliamslcsw.
Well, that was that. I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation as much as we did. We certainly could have still been on the call with her because I think there's a lot to talk about. I really appreciate her authenticity and her showing up as her full self as we promote very heavily on the pod. And if you are local to Southern California and you have the means and the availability, we are going to certainly try our best, like we said, to be at the event coming up here very soon, August 11th in Long Beach.
Yes.
From about 2 to 4.
We will link the details in the show notes. We're going to link all of Brittany's information, and she will be posting the event. So if you need details on where the event is, the address, the time, all of that, we'll link that below. And we hope to see you there. It's going to be a great event. So if you are available to go, please go, and maybe you'll see us. I want to say like we're 80% sure we can go. It just depends on timing and traffic.
Yes. It really is it.
Reminder that you can comment on Spotify now. So if you made it to the end of this episode and you are listening on Spotify or YouTube, please comment a music note emoji to let us know you made it to the end of the episode. Yeah. Also, let us know who is your favorite hip hop artist and why.
And if you want to get real with it, I guess it goes along with the why, but maybe speak to a little bit about how they've helped you or how the lyrics in general, the music at all, has impacted your mental health journey.
Yeah. Reminder to follow us on Apple Pods and Spotify. Subscribe on YouTube. We see you guys.
We see you guys.
Our YouTube views are rising. So thank you guys so much for watching. Give us a thumbs up because that's going to tell YouTube that you like this content.
Yeah.
And that's going to boost us in the algorithm, which really helps us out. So thank you so much. And if you want to continue the conversation and see what else we're up to, follow us at empathsanonpod on Instagram and TikTok.
The TikToks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wherever you want to talk to us, we reply everywhere. YouTube is just fun because you can have more lengthy conversations, which clearly we are lengthy conversation having ass bitches.
We are yappers.
And I think that pretty much ends this episode, which was so good. We're so thankful to Brittany once again for coming on the pod.
Yes.
Nobody ever has to say yes to us. And we are so, so grateful when people say yes to us and give us the opportunity and the chance to have these conversations that we otherwise would not have been able to have. So thanks again.
Thank you again, Brittany. It was so lovely having you. And we are going to close this episode with some of her work. So we hope that you guys enjoy this verse on self-love.
Bye.
Bye.
I've been working hard, reconnected to God. The 5 chakras in alignment, knowing where my timing's off. Meditating deep, breathing in and breathing out. This that Mamba mentality Kobe been talking about. I'm on that thug life rose that grew from the concrete tip. Late registration, miseducation, the L-book ish. This that making peace with my inner child. Setting boundaries, holding my head high, now I can smile, yo. I can feel the change. I know you're sensing when we shift from crying is weak to now it's cleansing. This is me redefining well, inner peace, self-control. Put them together, that's physical and mental health. Yo, parasympathetic, regulated, therapeutic integration of rhythm and flow. Got me in the zone, created a lane just to say it's okay to not be okay. Keep your head up, dog, cause we got better days. They be doubting me so much, but yo, I love me. Self-love is the best love, yo, I love me. Look at the person up in the mirror and say, I love me. I'm flawed, but hella worthy, yo, I love me. Created in the image of God, yo, I love me. Access to higher energy, yo, I love me. Circle hella small, but that's just cause I love me. It's peace over everything, cause I love me. You know I'm flawed, but dog, I'm hella worthy. I've been through hell and back, and I'm so proud of my journey. They ain't ready for my comeback, Lord have mercy. I hold my head high, cause I ain't got no worries. They be doubting me so much, but yo, I love me. Self-love is the best love, yo, I love me. Circle hella small, but that's just cause I love me. It's peace over everything, cause I love me.